I was 17 when my mother first used the word embarrassing to describe me, and she said it loudly enough that the whole kitchen went quiet. The fan above us kept spinning, rattling like it always did, and my younger brother stopped chewing mid-bite. My father didn't look up from his phone. No one defended me. I stood there with my school bag still on my shoulder, grease from the bus rail on my hand, and told her calmly that I had accepted a job at the local factory. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't an office. It was loud, hot, and honest work. I needed the money, and I didn't want to be a burden anymore. She laughed first. Not a nervous laugh, not an unsure one. A sharp, cutting laugh that landed harder than shouting ever could. Then she said it. Factory work? Do you have any idea how that sounds? Do you want people to think we raised someone like that? I tried to explain. I told her I'd still finish my studies at night, that the supervisor had agreed to flexible shifts, that this was temporary. She waved her hand as if brushing dust off a shelf. My friends' children are getting internships, office jobs, scholarships. And you want to wear oil-stained clothes and come home smelling like metal? That night, she sent a message in the family group chat. I didn't know about it until my phone buzzed non-stop while I was lying in bed. Mother's Day dinner this Sunday. Successful kids only. There was a laughing emoji after it. Then a clapping one. Then hearts. My siblings reacted instantly. Thumbs up. Fire emojis. Someone replied, "Can't wait." My name wasn't mentioned. Not once. I stared at the screen for a long time. I waited for someone to notice. For my father to say something. For my older sister to joke that it was a mistake. Nothing came. The chat kept moving without me, plans being made as if I didn't exist at all. On Mother's Day, I went to work. The factory floor was louder than usual, machines screaming, belts rattling, the air thick with heat and sweat. I focused on my hands, on the rhythm of tightening bolts and stacking parts, because thinking too much hurt. During my break, I sat outside on a crate and ate a sandwich I'd packed myself. I imagined them at the restaurant, laughing, taking photos, telling stories where I was conveniently missing. That became the pattern. Slowly, quietly, I stopped being invited to things. Birthdays came and went. Holidays passed with polite, distant messages sent late at night. When relatives asked what I was doing these days, my mother answered for me. "Oh, nothing special," she'd say. "Just figuring things out." At the factory, no one asked me to be anything other than reliable. I showed up early. I stayed late. I learned how the machines worked, how the schedules were built, how orders were tracked. I listened more than I spoke. I saved every extra dollar. When my supervisor offered me training for a more technical role, I said yes without thinking twice. At home, things got colder. Conversations became short and practical. My mother avoided mentioning my job unless it was to compare me to someone else's child. One evening, she looked at me over her tea and said, "You know, if you tried harder, you wouldn't have to live like this." That was the moment something inside me settled. Not anger. Not sadness. Just clarity. I realized I was trying to prove myself to people who had already decided my worth. And I was tired. A year later, I moved out without making an announcement. I found a small room close to the factory, cheap and quiet. I left a note on the kitchen counter thanking them for everything and saying I needed space. No drama. No accusations. Just distance. Weeks passed. Then months. No one came looking. No one asked where I'd gone. I worked. I studied. I slept. I built a routine that belonged only to me. And slowly, without telling anyone, I started to disappear from their lives for real. Living alone changed me faster than I expected. There was no one to impress, no one to disappoint. Every decision I made had consequences, and every consequence belonged only to me. I worked longer shifts, volunteered for overtime no one else wanted, and kept my head down while learning everything I could. The factory wasn't just a job anymore. It became a system I understood better than most people inside it. I learned how inventory shortages really happened, how small scheduling mistakes caused massive delays, how management never saw problems until it was too late. One night, during a breakdown that stopped an entire line, I fixed an issue the engineers had missed. The supervisor watched silently as the machines came back to life. The next morning, I was moved to a technical team. A month later, I was training new hires. 6 months after that, I was sitting in meetings I was never supposed to be in, listening to people in suits argue over numbers they didn't fully understand. I didn't tell my family any of this. They didn't ask. Years passed quietly. I finished my education at night, paid for it myself, and kept climbing. The factory expanded. Then it merged. Then it rebranded. I followed every change from the inside, not because I was chasing titles, but because I understood something most people didn't. How the whole thing actually worked when no one was watching. Meanwhile, my family only heard fragments. A cousin mentioned I was still at that place. An aunt joked that I was probably comfortable settling. My mother repeated those words like facts. Then came the invitation. It was short. Polite. Almost formal. Mother's Day dinner this year. Family only. No emojis this time. No jokes. No mention of successful kids. I stared at the message longer than I should have. Part of me wanted to ignore it completely. Another part, quieter, older, wondered why now. I replied with a simple okay. The restaurant was expensive. I recognized it immediately. Private dining rooms. Valet parking. The kind of place my family liked to pretend they belonged in. I arrived early out of habit, wearing a clean jacket, nothing flashy. The host checked my name twice before leading me inside. When I walked into the room, conversation stopped for half a second. Not dramatically. Just enough to notice. My siblings smiled politely. My father nodded. My mother looked surprised, then quickly masked it. You came, she said. I said I would, I replied. Dinner was uncomfortable. They talked about promotions, investments, people I didn't know. Every now and then, someone asked me what I was up to. I answered vaguely. Work. Busy. Doing fine. Then my mother cleared her throat. I suppose you're still at the factory, she said, not unkindly, but not kindly either. Yes, I said. She sighed, the way people do when they think they've lost an argument long ago. Well, as long as you're happy. Before I could respond, the manager entered the room and walked straight toward me. Sorry to interrupt, he said, smiling professionally. Just confirming, should we proceed with the expansion proposal tonight, or would you prefer to review it tomorrow? The table went silent. My mother frowned. Expansion proposal, she asked. The manager looked confused. Yes. For the northern facility. We're waiting on final approval. He turned back to me. I looked at my family, at their faces, frozen between curiosity and disbelief, and said calmly. Tomorrow will be fine. The manager nodded respectfully and left. No one spoke for several seconds. Then my sister laughed nervously. That was weird, she said. Why would he ask you that? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My mother's smile faded slowly, replaced by something closer to fear. My mother was the first to break the silence. What do you mean, approval? She asked, her voice thinner than I remembered. I set my fork down carefully. Exactly what it sounds like. My father leaned back in his chair, studying me like I was a stranger who had wandered into the wrong room. You work at a factory, he said slowly. You don't run anything. I met his eyes. I started on the floor. I didn't stay there. My sister scoffed. That manager was probably confused. Or joking. At that moment, another staff member entered, carrying a leather folder. He stopped beside me, not my father, not my mother. Me. Apologies, he said quietly. The board requested confirmation. They're ready whenever you are. The color drained from my mother's face. What board? She whispered. I opened the folder, not to show off, not dramatically, just because it was handed to me. Inside were documents my family didn't recognize but somehow understood. Logos. Numbers. Signatures. My signature. I didn't disappear, I said calmly. I stepped away. My brother pushed his chair back slightly. Away, from what? From people who decided who I was before I finished becoming anything. No one laughed now. No one spoke. I explained everything without raising my voice. How the factory grew. How I stayed when others quit. How I invested early, quietly. How the merger created an opportunity most people missed. How I became one of the largest private stakeholders before anyone bothered to ask my name again. My mother shook her head. You never told us. You never asked, I replied. You told everyone else who I was. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The waiter returned, hesitant. Shall we continue the courses? I nodded. Yes. No one ate much after that. When dessert arrived, my mother finally spoke again. Her tone was different now, careful, almost gentle. We were just trying to motivate you. I looked at her for a long moment. By calling me embarrassing? By excluding me? Tears filled her eyes. We didn't know. That's the point, I said softly. You didn't want to. My sister tried one last time. So what now? She asked. You just disappear again? I stood, straightening my jacket. No. I'm done disappearing. I turned to my mother. But I'm also done proving myself. The next morning, I approved the expansion. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. Weeks later, news traveled fast, faster than apologies ever do. Articles. Industry mentions. A profile someone forwarded into the family group chat. My name. My position. My photo. No one reacted with emojis this time. My mother sent a message privately. Long, emotional. Full of regret. I read it once. Then closed my phone. Some victories don't need replies. I didn't cut them off. I didn't punish anyone. I simply stopped shrinking so they could feel comfortable. And that was the moment they finally understood. I was never the embarrassment. I was the consequence of their blindness.